Welcome to Martha Runs the World, a podcast with a new take on running, fitness, and all things health-oriented. I'm Martha Hughes, your host, and each week I present a new topic that is of interest to all runners. Hi, and welcome to episode 299 of Martha Runs the World. I am really excited this week for a couple reasons, but the biggest reason I'm excited this week is because of my special guest, Wes Plate. You know the name, right? If you watch any running videos at all, you know who Wes is. He's incredible. He's a great videographer. He's an incredible runner. He is just an all-around wonderful person. I don't want to keep this intro long. I want it to be very short because you really want to hear what he has to say. And don't go anywhere because I have a few parting words at the end. So without further ado, here is the magnificent Wes Plate. Will you welcome to the show? He's a tech guru, shall I say, a videographer, and you probably watched a lot of his videos. And he's a 200-mile master, Wes Plate. Hi, Wes. How are you?
I'm really good, Martha. Thanks for having me on your show. This is quite an honor.
Oh, well, thank you very much for being on my show. I have watched every one of your videos. I love them so much. I'm a fan. I really am.
Thank you.
You've inspired so many of us. What or who inspires you?
Oh gosh. The first thing that comes to mind was when originally I got really inspired by a runner named Ben Light. Back in like 2017, I was kind of getting interested in running long distance. And at that point, I had already run a 50K. And I think maybe I was in the process of training for a 50 miler. And I remember seeing Ben Light on Instagram. And I think he was doing the Triple Crown of 200s maybe that year. Anyway, I just was so inspired by somebody who kind of looked like a regular person who was doing some tough stuff. So I was really inspired by him, actually at that time. Kerry Ward around that time also really inspired me. His YouTube channel showing some of those very first 200 milers really inspired me. And that kind of led me into doing my own documenting of my races, like you mentioned. And, these days I'm often inspired by just a lot of the people who I meet at races. There's a guy in San Diego named Gabe Peterson, who's just a dad, a regular dude, but he's always off doing the toughest stuff. And so I'm often inspired by what Gabe is doing. Yeah, I just think there's so many amazing people out there doing neat things. And what I love about it is that a lot of them are regular people, and that really inspires me.
Exactly. Those are the people that inspire me too, who have families. Well, I've got to find a sitter because I have this race coming up. And those are the people. I mean, how do they fit it all in? I don't know. I'm single. Right. I'm single, so I have all the time in the world. But these people, they don't have any time at all, yet they do it. I don't know how. I really don't. Now, you decided you were going to start filming your trail runs. So you look so smooth in your running and filming now, and they almost look so flawless. How long did it take you to coordinate filming and running?
That probably took me maybe over the course of a year to start to get better at that. My very first thing that I filmed was my first attempt at a 100-miler in, I think it was September of 2018. That was the Mountain Lakes 100 in Oregon. And, I maybe like some other people, I went going into my first 100-miler thinking, well, I hope I can do this. I don't know if I'll ever do this again. So since it felt sort of uniquely special, I brought my phone along with me to record the thing. So I used whatever iPhone was available in 2018. It didn't have very good stabilization, and I just recorded as much of the thing as I could. I really enjoyed making that. So my background is in video production. And at that time in 2018, I was working at Apple as one of the software designers of Final Cut Pro, which is one of their video editing applications. At that time, I wasn't making a lot of video myself. I was so busy working at Apple that I felt disconnected from that creative side of me. So seeing other people's YouTube videos of their running helped inspire me to create a document of my own. And that was just really something that I needed as a creative outlet, and also just to document the experience. And it taught me a lot. I loved sharing it. The video itself wasn't very good because of the iPhone not having very good stabilization. So over the course of 2019, I got GoPro cameras and started to get a little bit better about having a higher quality production. But then I think the first problem I ran into was I often would forget to record. I would bring the camera with me, but then especially if I was having a low moment, I might just completely not document it. So it took a little bit of time for me to both get the camera part under control, but also the remembering to record part. So that's kind of always a challenge, but I think I'm a little bit better at that now.
Well, especially in those hard parts where you're trying to balance and trying not to fall,
I think I've kicked a lot of rocks because I was half paying attention to the camera instead of what was in front of me.
Oh, that would scare me a lot. But, what I love are what you do record that I really love is your interaction when you come into the aid stations and you talk to your crew and your family and the aid workers. And that shows, and some of them are not your highest moments. Some of them are where you're really tired or you're really hungry and maybe you don't feel like going on. And that just makes me feel more connected to you because we all have felt those moments. And I really like seeing those on film
Yeah.
and video.
Thank you for saying that. That's what other runners tell me too. Sometimes I was at the Cocodona 250 this last May, and at one of the aid stations, I was just other runners were coming up to me and saying, "Hey, we really appreciate your stuff." But they kind of I remember one guy especially really made the comment. He's like, "The reason why I like your stuff is that you show you show the reality of it. You show the bad with the good, show the struggle." And yes, I often show myself crying. That's not something that I'm afraid of. Because I do want to keep it as real as I can and just share exactly what I'm feeling. I think that's what people want to see.
If you haven't cried on the trail, you're not trying hard enough, I don't think.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Okay, before I get to that, how long does it take you to put one of these films together? Because they are just so well done.
Yeah, thank you. They take a lot of time, and that's a struggle that I have because I don't have the time available in my schedule to devote to these projects. I like to think that if I had 2 weeks straight of just nothing but editing time after one of these large runs, I could get the film done in 2 weeks. The actual assembling of all of the shots doesn't seem to take me very long. I can sort of string together the rough story of my GoPro clips, plus my wife's iPhone clips, and maybe some other cameras that we collect. I can generally assemble that in a couple of days. Doesn't take me very long, but what takes a long time is tightening up all the edits into something that is a bit better, adding the music, adding the animations. Because one thing I can't do is film at night very well. The GoPro doesn't have very good light sensitivity. So, and there's not much even to show at night anyway. So during nighttime segments of my films, I will create an animation to give the viewer at least a bird's eye view of what I traversed during that nighttime section. And then those storytelling elements take time to produce as well and take time to finesse. So yeah, it does take a lot of time. I'm still working on my Cocodona 250 film that I shot this May. And, here we are at the end of September, and it's causing me a lot of stress. Actually, I really want to get this film done. I just don't have the time. So I'm trying to make some changes in my life so I can devote time. And, but yeah, it's a struggle constantly.
I know you're going to, but I would tell you not to stress so much over it, just to get it done right. And then you'll feel better, because you don't want to put out a product that you're not happy with or you're not pleased with, because then you're going to feel worse.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And there's really no danger of me doing that. The frustration is merely that my time, there's something that I want to do and my time isn't giving me that. And that just causes me frustration, because it's like the time that I'm spending at work, that's not what I want to be doing right now. So yeah, it's just a conflict of interests between the things I have to do to pay the bills and really wanting to finish this movie.
It's part of life, isn't it? Unfortunately. I mean, why do we have to do that? Really? I mean, come on. We shouldn't have to be able to do that, but we have to.
Yeah.
Now you've accomplished so many races. It was in 2022 that you did all 4 of the 200 US races, right? 200
That's
plus
right.
miles. You accomplished the Cocodona 250, the Tahoe 200, the Bigfoot 200, and the Moab 240. And first of all, I have to say, wow, that is really spectacular. But how do you plan to do all 4 in 1 year? What goes into that planning?
That year was nuts for planning. Yeah, I actually sometimes think back and I'm also amazed that I did that in 2022. It was quite a year. Um, we just sort of took one race at a time in some ways. So in early spring, April, started to really plan for the for the Cocodona trip in Arizona. Then tried to recover after that, and then switched my brain into thinking, okay, well, let's start to get ready for Tahoe now, because I think there might have been 5 or 6 weeks in between the two that year, and yeah, there wasn't necessarily a lot of training in between those races, which kind of was nice. It was just a little bit of movement to maintain flexibility and just to maintain things. Um, but yeah, there's a lot of planning in terms of like getting drop bags together and thinking about the spreadsheet for when am I going to get into certain aid stations, certain times, and that all that preparation takes a lot of time for me. But yeah, I don't know. It's one of those things like, how did I do it? I don't know how I did it, but somehow that situation I placed myself in required me to figure it out. And we figured it out. And yeah, got all four of them done. I think the biggest thing that surprised me was that I felt like over the course of the year, I was actually getting stronger. So every race I felt stronger at. And then every recovery after each one of those 200s felt a little bit easier. So the body just seemed to take it in stride and be strong and get stronger as I went. It was quite a journey.
That speaks volumes towards your training then that you had beforehand.
Yeah, I think you're right. I trained really hard to get ready for all of that, and I've had a coach for several years, and that I was working with a coach that year as well. And yeah, we just worked really hard to kind of get the body ready to go. And there were certain things that we didn't like at Tahoe that year. I had a really bad lung respiratory issues, where I had difficulty breathing, and a lot of runners have that problem at Tahoe. And that led me to what I felt like was the closest I've ever been to dropping at a 200. Well, until this last month when I did drop at a 200.
And we'll talk about that. But
okay. But yeah, until that moment, I was like, oh my God, I think I'm going to actually have to drop. But then I managed to press through it. But it was a really that was a challenging thing that I had to sort of figure out. Yeah. And thankfully that I got that race finished. But yeah, tough stuff for sure.
About that race, what race did you just have a DNF at?
The DNF was at the Divide 200 up in Alberta in early September.
Okay. Is that your first DNF?
My first DNF in a 200, yes.
But not your first DNF overall then?
That's correct. Yeah, I had previously DNF'd twice at the 100-mile distance in two different races.
Okay, I was going to say if that was your first DNF, you're superhuman. But but yeah. So what happened?
Boy, I think the DNF probably started before I even left home, to be quite honest with you. I've had a tough year this year with my respiratory. With Cocodona, I feel like every year at Cocodona, I end up getting a bunch of dust and other stuff in my lungs that caused me some troubles for a little while afterwards. And this year, ever since Cocodona, I've had a persistent cough. I feel like a little bit less lung capacity than I'm accustomed to. And so I've been trying to get this figured out for months, trying to get myself feeling better, because all these lung problems are causing me strength and energy problems. So I just don't feel as strong as I am accustomed to feeling. And I actually was supposed to run the Canadian Death Race in early August. And as August was approaching, I was looking at that event and looking at my fitness. And I said, that I don't have what it takes to get that thing done in the 24-hour cutoff. So I withdrew from that. But then August, I started to feel a little bit of improvements in some of my fitness. And so I thought, well, let's just try the Divide. Let's just see how it goes. I wasn't sure if I was going to have the respiratory abilities to get it done, but they promised at the Divide that the first day is the hardest. And so I just thought, well, let's just at least see how far I can get. The first section is pretty easy to get to the first water drop, but then the second starts some really strong climbing, some really steep climbs, followed by a steep descent, followed by another steep climb. And as I was doing all this climbing, I started to just slow down. More and more runners were passing me. I could just feel myself moving a lot slower than I want. I just didn't have the strength. And went into that nighttime again with runners passing me. I was coughing like crazy, trying to deal with the elevation, and my lungs were just causing me problems. And I got to third checkpoint with less than 2 hours to go before it's cut off. And I wanted to take a nap. And I think I had just decided that I was going to let myself time out at that aid station. The difficulty of the course I knew was going to get a little bit easier, but there was also rain in the forecast. And I was thinking, I'm going slow. I don't want to chase cutoffs. I also have this respiratory thing I've been fighting since the spring. Do I want to make that worse? Do I want to make my overall fitness worse? I've got big plans for the spring. These are all going in my head. So I said, you know what? This isn't the most important race to me. I would rather be ready for the spring. So I decided to take my first 200-mile DNF and turn and do something that I might enjoy better, which was I went straight to HQ after I DNF'd and I signed up for volunteer shifts. And then I just went and I volunteered and I had so much fun. And I even paced a friend for a section. So, yeah, I had a lot more fun than I would have had if I had tried to push through.
That's very, very cool. That's such a great attitude. I mean, the very healthy attitude. So you kept yourself from feeling bad and you just made it a great outing for yourself. How wonderful. Well, when you think of Cogedona, and it's a beautiful course, but you're out there for days in dry, dusty, desert, arid conditions. So it's not surprising that it would cause problems on your lungs, really, and all that dust.
Yeah. And then at Cocodona this year, in addition to the dust and whatever pollen that I might normally get at that race, this year there was also a prescribed burn around Flagstaff in the last couple of days. And so I finished that race running through some thick blue smoke that made it even worse. So yeah, it was a tough time for me this year. And I'm still trying to figure out what it did to my lungs and how I can heal.
Yeah, that can happen, unfortunately. Well, sorry to hear that. But at least, like I said, at least you made it into a good outing. So that's wonderful. Yeah. Now you have a new series on your channel that is really cool. It's called Ultra Origins, where you talk to guests about their first ultra or their new distance, or they're going a little bit longer distance. So how did you decide to do this?
In 2014 or 15, I was getting ready for my first ultra. So the very first ultra I ran was a 50K in October of 2015. And leading up to that, I was soaking in everything ultra that I could to get ready for it. I was reading blogs, I was reading books, I was listening to podcasts. And one of the podcasts that I was listening to was basically this same idea. It was people who had just finished their first ultra talking about how they trained for it and how the run went. And I thought it was really inspiring to me because most of these people were all regular people. They had just done something that I was preparing to do. So I was just listening to everything they had to say about gear and whatever strategies they had. I thought that I just really loved that podcast. And in fact, I felt like I was blessed to be a guest on it in November of 2015 after I finished my first ultra. But I don't know, a couple of years later, that podcast folded and they even took its archive off the internet. So it's like it's entirely lost to history. But I thought it was a really great thing. And I kept wishing that somebody else would make this podcast. And meanwhile, as I kept wishing for that, my YouTube channel was growing and I started to hear from more and more runners that my experience was inspiring them to get into running and to do things. So I started to have this voice in the back of my head that said, well, maybe I'm the person who needs to bring back this idea of this podcast or this series of interviews, conversations. And I think it was this spring, I was at a couple different races. And again, I was running into runners who were like, hey, I'm here because I watched your video about this race, or I'm in ultra now because you inspired me to do this. And I'm like, well, these are the people that I need to be talking to. So that just sort of kicked me into gear. And this spring, started to do some tests, and I think it was at the end of June or beginning of July, we started to record these conversations. And, or actually maybe the conversation started to release in July. We were recording them before that. But yeah, I thought it'd be really fun if I could just talk to regular people who are doing tough things, and hear about their origin stories getting into ultra. So that's why we called it Ultra Origins. And it's been a fun way just to have really casual conversations with runners about something cool that they did, and sharing those runners' stories with other people so that we can help inspire, another generation of runners.
I think that's great. I love it. I love the fact that you opened with your own story, which I know you've told over many times, so I won't go into it again. I'll include the link to your channel and the link to that particular episode because it's really, really fascinating. I love your story, and I love that you opened up about it on your channel. I think that is very, very cool. I'm also very happy for your sobriety in 2008. My year's 2005 when I got sober. So
Okay. Yeah.
I
Congratulations to you too.
thank you, thank you. I always say that life is beautiful. That's what I say because it is, and it's too
Mm.
beautiful to waste.
Yeah, that's true.
Yes, very much so. So what keeps you going and running? Why do you keep
Uh,
doing it?
um, well, I think there's a lot of factors to it. I do enjoy having the challenge of some of these long ultras
Mhm.
and getting to the finish line and having to suffer all the way through the parts that are hard in order to get to the parts that are good and then to later suffer some more to finally make it to the finish. I do enjoy it all. It's quite a process. Um, but I have confidence and self-esteem issues like maybe other people do. I don't know. I know that I have voices in my head that say very not nice things. And so when I show up at a race and I meet another runner who says, "Hey, I've watched your channel. You've really inspired me," or "I really enjoy the things you're doing," that good feeling that person is telling me, that validation means a lot to me. And I think it helps counter the voices that otherwise I'm telling myself. So I definitely get quite a lot from the running community who are happy to meet me. And so I'm very thankful for that. And that motivates me too. Um, yeah, I think it's a combination of challenging myself and then sharing that challenge with others. Certainly the YouTube aspect of it. I still love making the films, even though they stress me out, but I love sharing that. And so it's another motivating factor for me is the creative aspect of how can I tell the story or how can I share this thing? Um, as soon as I finish the Cocodona video, I will give myself a challenge to at least make a film about my Divide 200 experience, even though it was short lived. I did whatever I shot. I was shooting something in the intention of creating this entire thing. It's going to be slightly different. So there's going to be a little bit of a challenge, but it'll also be a fun way for me to share my experience of that first day.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, I think those are the things. A little bit of external motivation plus the internal too.
Well, and I think all of us, everyone gets a DNF, and unless you're not trying hard enough, is what it is. I don't think if you never get a DNF, then you only learn from DNFs. I think
Yeah.
you don't
DNFs
learn.
are a wonderful teaching tool.
Yeah, they're sometimes the only one. Right?
Yeah.
And if you do a video about DNFs, we can all relate to it. I mean, we all have our own DNF stories. And yeah, one of mine is being chased by a swarm of yellow jackets. That was fun.
Oh my gosh.
I
That's
know,
how terrifying.
I know. I lost my two big toenails in that race too. That was also fun. Very fun race. Like I said, we all have our own stories. We could all relate to it, and we could all commiserate with you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I've said a lot recently, and after after I DNF'd the Divide 200, I released a video on my YouTube channel where I described this thing, and I talked about in that my mission has been recently to talk about normalizing DNFs and try to get people to think about DNFs less is a negative thing. Or it's certainly not a dire thing. It doesn't mean that you're a bad runner or a bad person. Although I used to think that. I mean, I know when I started out running, I was terrified of a DNF because if the thing that I was starting to make my identity based on, if I can't do that thing, then why am I even out here? What am I even doing? So I was terrified. So in some ways, my first DNFs at the 100-mile distance did help rip the Band-Aid off a little bit and make me a bit more accepting of it. Sometimes you're not ready for an event. My first DNF was because it was too quick after my first Cocodona and my body just wasn't ready. And I tried, but I wasn't. And that was a good thing for me to learn that I'm not as invincible as I thought I was, or I can't bounce back exactly a month later to do it. At least at that time, I couldn't. And so I think that there's always something to learn, and ultras are hard. I think sometimes maybe all the media, all that we put out there is constantly showing us finishing these things and finishing and finishing and finishing. And if you watch enough of that media, you're going to get this expectation that, oh yeah, you sign up for an ultra, then you finish the ultra. That's the thing that happens. I think we need to get the understanding out there much more that you sign up for an ultra and maybe you finish the ultra is the way it should go, because they're too hard. And especially your first time out, you can't possibly know everything you need to know to actually successfully get to the finish line. I almost feel like if you finish your first ultra or finish almost any ultra, there's a lot of luck involved. So I guess my long way of saying all that is that I'm trying to feel good about my ultra and I'm trying to feel good about my DNF and not be like, oh, so sad. I'm not calling it a failure. It was just that day, my decision was that I had something else in mind for how to spend my time. And partly that was easy decision for me to make because I had previously had finished 10 200s. So I've done a lot. I've accomplished a lot. I didn't feel like I had anything to prove that time.
You're absolutely right. I mean, you have to take it as a learning experience and turn it into something positive. And I think what you're saying is true. Our sport and it's in all running really is that they try to all the running books, and I've read almost all running books, and not the ones written by people who have an inspirational story. I love them, and I always love them. But the ones written by pros, they want to try to make everybody seem like an elite runner, and we're not elite runners. The pro writers, the coaches, the personal trainers, all these people, the running coaches, all these people who write books, they really should relate them more to the regular runners. We're not going to go out there and be Courtneys. We're not going to go out there and be these types of people. That's not who we are. We're going to be middle pack or back of the pack. Those we're always going to be chasing cutoff times. And to make it seem like it's going to be really not easy, but it's going to be a lot easier than it is to do an ultra is kind of cheating us from what the truth is, I think.
Yeah. I mean, I think I could do a better job even in my films of really trying to say like, hey, there was a hard section here. I almost quit or I wanted to quit. Sometimes I do try to show how hard it is, but I also recognize that the camera's not on all the time. Yeah. So there are things that are happening that aren't being documented where maybe I am questioning something or I'm really struggling more than it makes it seem like. But that's the difficulty of trying to share something in a video form is you can't record every single thing.
No. And you do fine. You do just fine with your videos. We see you at your down points and you see other people who are struggling and you talk to them and you give them a little bit of encouragement. I think that helps and stuff. So you have a very balanced view on your video. So you don't have anything to worry about. That, that's not really what I'm referring to, but there's this one book, and I won't mention it because I mentioned it in this week's podcast. If you want to listen to it, you can. But he mentions that elite runners can suffer more than regular runners. And it's not true at all. I'm sorry, but that's not true. That is not true. Regular runners have whole lives. They go to jobs, they take care of kids, and then they go out and train for that race. Elite runner, all they do is run. That's all they do. So no, I'm sorry. Who can take more pain? Who can take more pain? No. Okay. I'm not going to get in that rant. I already did that one. But it's just that I think there's a blind spot. Maybe they see stars in their eyes when they see elite runners and they don't understand how hard us regular runners train and how hard we work for where we are. Maybe they just don't understand that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, there's amazing stories from the back of the pack and, right. People have to train really hard in their normal lives, which means they don't get the same level of or the amount of time that the elites get on the trail. And it can be difficult to get to the event. People have to bring maybe some family or they have to make some arrangements for family. Mm-hmm. And then of course the people at the back of the pack are on the course so much longer than the elites that, it could be a day or 2 days more out there suffering. The people who finish last are the hardiest because they have been on the course the longest, really, really showing a lot of resilience. And so that's why I'm so impressed by the really cheering on and being happy about the people at the back of the pack and the last finishers. Yeah, they're the strongest.
Especially in those 200 milers. My goodness, those take so long, and or those 200 plus races, they take so long. And those people who finish last, they just stay out there. They don't care. They get it done. They're just they're they're heroes.
They really
Really.
are. Yeah, for sure.
Is it difficult for you to find that good life running work balance? Or do you make it work? You make it work somehow, obviously, but is it difficult?
It has been a little bit difficult to get everything balanced in my life with running and work and the work that's related to running. Um, I definitely take on a lot of stuff. I have a mostly full-time job. I My YouTube channel itself takes a lot of time to do stuff for. This Earlier this year, I had a weekly series where I was recapping that week's training. It was popular. People really liked it, and people have been asking me to talk about my training for some time. Before that, I had resisted it because I was like, "Oh, it's going to take so much time." But anyway, I finally did it, and I'm glad I did it. But it also did take up so much time. Just about every Sunday afternoon, was busy shooting and editing and creating the weekly thing. So yeah, trying to get it all juggled has been difficult. Now, one thing that I guess is better for me now is my daughter is 21 years old. So she's a grown up. But, when I was starting out training for ultras, she was more like 13 and 14. And I was doing everything I could to spend time with her when she was that age. So back then I used to wake up at 2 or 3 a.m. so I could get my run started, or at 3 or 4 a.m. And that way I could be back home by 7 or 8 a.m. And she's just waking up, but I've got my long run done so I could devote time to her. So there was a time when I really did have to juggle things, and it was really quite challenging. I guess it's still a challenge now, but I feel like I have a little bit more flexibility because I don't have necessarily that commitment.
Oh,
I am newly married though, so my wife and my wife, who's been in my videos,
yeah.
all the videos you've seen, for most of those videos, Leah was my girlfriend, and then she was my fiance. And so in the next film, the Cocodona video, she actually gets a upgrade in title because by the time the film comes out, we are now married. And but it's there. I want to devote as much time as I can to spend with her and our life that we're building together. So thankfully, Leah's also a runner. So there we often will go out for a long Saturday run. We do our own thing, but then we meet back at the car like 5 hours later. And so, I think I have similar challenges as the rest of the mid and the back of the pack, just trying to make it all work is hard. There's not enough hours in the day. And part of me wishes I could just stay up all night and work on stuff, but sleep is the one of the biggest parts of the whole thing. You have to sleep for the recovery. So yeah, it's a juggling act for sure.
Yeah, it is hard. I first I want to say congratulations.
Thank you.
And I love your family. I remember your daughter when she was younger, and Leah, she is just such a treasure. I don't know her, but I see her in the videos, and I love her support. And you can just tell you two are just made for each other. I think she's awesome. She is so awesome. And driving the van to the different locations or whatever vehicle you have that day, that is just, wow. You two are just incredible. Just really, really cool. Yeah.
I'm not sure people realize how difficult crewing is. Running a 200 miler is really hard, but crewing a 200 miler is equally hard in a lot of ways. She doesn't get that much sleep during all that. And some locations are really difficult to get to. Sometimes you're on a sketchy road next to a cliff in the middle of the night. And she works super hard, as do all the crews. So there's a lot of love and appreciation. Definitely they deserve.
Aren't there some locations like in Bigfoot that are just really, really, really harsh to get to?
That's right. Bigfoot's probably the worst 200 miler for crew. The second half of the race has some aid stations that take hours and hours to get to. You have no service the entire time. So the crews have to sort of do a bit of planning in order to make sure they've got good, robust directions. They know where they're going. Because if they were to get lost, there would really be no way to find your way out. So download your Google Maps so that they have offline maps available to you. Maybe even have Gaia, which the runners are using on the phone, so that you can also get a different view of the maps. But yeah, I don't know. It's bad out there, and some of the roads are just not narrow and sketchy, and some of the parking areas for the aid stations are equally challenging to get into. So yeah, it's. I'm glad that I haven't had to crew anybody at Bigfoot. I've just had to run it. That's all.
It's almost like planning a battle. You have to have all these things in place just properly, or else it's not going to work.
That's right.
Oh my goodness, that's so crazy. See that's and then you did four of them in one year. poor
And I
poor
couldn't have
Leah.
done, and I couldn't have done all that without Leah for sure.
No, oh my goodness. She deserves a medal. She deserves
Absolutely
a
does.
trophy. My goodness. All right. Well, I have one final question for you, and I always like to ask this of my running guests. If money, travel, qualifications weren't an issue, what race would you like to do anywhere in the world?
Oh, that's such a difficult question. Um, I don't have very many races right now that are like on some wish list that I wish I could get to. Um, I'm gonna give you an edit point here somewhere.
It's all right. Take your
Uh,
time.
that's such a difficult question, Martha. I I used to have a rule that I never would repeat a race because there was just too many races out in the world and it didn't make sense to repeat them. And then Cocodona turned me into a liar on that one because I ended up doing Cocodona a second time because the first year was the inaugural year and I was like, I want to see how they improve things
Yeah.
in the second year. But then the second year was a modified course because of the fire. And so then I went back for the third year so I could do the regular course again. And then I went back for the fourth year so I could get 1,000 miles on that course. And it's kind of become a thing where I'm so tied in with that race and I love it
Yeah.
so much that it's the race I think about almost throughout all the year. And so weirdly, Cocodona is the answer to it,
Mm.
which is the saddest thing because I've already done it 4 times and I will be going back for my fifth, but it's the one that just has the biggest hold on me right now. And there are other things that I'd like to do, but,
Mhm.
I think Cocodona is still my thing right now.
Did you ever think about Tour de France anytime?
Uh, it's on my list. I mentioned Gabe Peterson, the most inspiring runner from San Diego. He's done it, and he said it was the hardest thing he's done. And so it makes me kind of want to do it, but I also know that it's so hard. So I definitely need to get my body figured out. My lung situation is going to have to see some improvement before I could ever try for that. Also, I would have to figure out my financial situation to get to Europe and run. That would cost a ton of money, which I don't
Yeah.
have. So but another thing that I am curious about is I am interested in like Vol State. That is
Yeah.
something that's got me going in my head. Like it's a different kind of running to go on road for 300 miles or whatever it is, across several more days, like several days, 8 or 9, maybe even for some people. Anyway, that intrigues me. And so I'm kind of thinking about that one. I don't know how that will fit into my life schedule, but what I like sometimes are not necessarily like trying to find something that's harder than the one that I've done, but just find something that's different than what I've done. Like the Cowboy 200, it sounds kind of terrible in a way, running on a rails to trail thing for 200 miles,
Mm.
but I kind of want to try it just to see what it's like, just because it is so different. Um, yeah, so there's so many things out there.
Yeah, there are.
I wish I had enough time and money and everything so that I could just go off and experience them all.
Wouldn't that be fun?
That's right.
Thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate it. And best of luck in everything. And I know that your whatever's coming up next for you, we can't wait to watch because I know
Wow.
that we'll want to be a part of it as well. All right. So thank you so much.
Thank you. It was really great to talk with you. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you so much, Wes, for being on my show. I've wanted you on my show for a long time, and finally it happened. I am over the moon happy about that. That is just terrific. Really happy. All right. Now I have my first 50K, my first ultra since 2020. Yeah, 2020 is happening this Saturday. I will finish it. There's no question about that I'm going to finish. And I don't even have a time that I want. I have 12 hours to finish it. So yeah, I'm going to finish it. Heck, I finished a 50K on my bad hip. I can finish this one. I don't have anything wrong with me anymore. So I am going to finish it. It's the Ruth Anderson Memorial 50K, and there's a 50 miler. That's why I have the long, generous cutoff. So I'm going to do that. That's at Lake Merced Saturday. I'm taking Friday, Saturday, and Sunday off work because it's Fleet Week as well. So I want to watch the Blue Angels. And the Blue Angels have a great F-22 team that's going to do a show as well. I love air shows, so I have to watch that Friday. That's going to happen Friday, so I don't want to work during that. So it's going to be a fabulous weekend. So I'm going to watch the air show Friday. I'm going to go out and do my race Saturday, and hopefully I can hobble out Sunday and watch the air show again. So it's going to be a great, great weekend. I am really looking forward to it. I have to get all my stuff together before my race, and that is also what I'm going to do Friday as well. So I need that time to do that and to get everything together. And I'm really excited about it too. I know that it's not going to be easy. It's going to be a really tough race, and I have to pull mind over matter, and I will. I will get it done. I will finish, and I'll tell you all about it afterwards. So that is it. That is today's show. You can see everything at martharunstheworld.com. I'm having little problems with my website, so I probably won't have a link to the normal link to the show, but I will put the link to the Spotify episode. There'll always be a link to some link that you can listen to the show at. There'll always be something. And there's always the normal Apple link and some other link there. It's just not directly to the Buzzsprout episode because for some reason Buzzsprout hasn't updated their link, so I can't do it that way. I don't know why. Don't ask me. But there'll always be some link there. I don't know. I had problems with the website. I had problems with the Buzzsprout link last week, and I just said, okay, I'm not going to let it frustrate me. I'm not going to let all this IT tech get to me. I'm just going to just take it easy and just let it flow and let it happen, and I'll work it out. Everything will be fine. And for once, I didn't let IT get to me. There are two problems that get to us more than anything, and it's IT and car problems. So those are the two things that irritate us more than anything as far as problems go. I swear. It's true. All right, but that is it, and that's a little behind the curtains stuff going on. All right, the website is martharunstheworld.com. If you want to email me, it's martharunstheworld@gmail.com. And that is it. So until next week, let's tie up our shoelaces and go for a run.